Faraz Shauketaly.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Recording. My guest this evening is Dr. Pakisoti Saravanmuthu, the Executive Director of the Center for Policy Alternatives. The Center for Policy Alternatives have found some disturbing sort of interpretations and the effects of the anti-terrorism bill, apart from other things too. But let's say good evening to you, Dr. Saravanmuthu. Welcome to the program. You're a troubled man on behalf of the country.
Well, yes. I mean, the point about this anti-terrorism bill is that it is fundamentally anti-democratic. It stifles dissent. It represses opposition. Yeah, you know, the government of Sri Lanka has pledged before the UN Human Rights Council that they will repeal the Prevention of Terrorism Act, the draconian Prevention of Terrorism Act, and replace it. Now, replacing it must be consistent with international human rights standards and the provisions of the various conventions that we are party to. Now, this does not do that. In 2018, I think the government came up with a Counter-Terrorism Act. Now, that never came to Parliament. This one is a version of it, but a much worse version of it because of the impact of democracy on this country. The one good thing about this bill is that it takes out confessions. Yeah, so you don't have confessions. But there are a number of other areas in which it sort of sends a chill down the backs of any citizens who want to express their opinions with regard to the behavior of the government of the country, as is their right to do. Now, for example, I mean, we at CPA, we have been campaigning against the PTA for the last 25 years or more, and we issued a statement, and in that statement, I'll read from that statement, you know, we say a major cause of concern is with detention orders. The bill places the power to make detention orders in the hands of a Deputy Inspector General of Police, a power which under the PTA is held by the Minister of Defense. However, while the 2018 Counter-Terrorism Act, the one that they didn't bring to Parliament, allowed for the initial detention orders by DIG to extend up to 2 weeks, this bill is more similar to the regime under the PTA, allowing the detention order to be made up for 3 months, and it can continue like that. You know, so that is a problem. It's a DIG who can provide the detention order and then do it for 3 months and keep doing it thereafter.
It's absolutely incredible. It sounds to me, though, Dr. Sara, that this anti-terrorism bill is all designed to control the Aragalists.
Well, yes, I mean, I think
of that.
That is an inescapable conclusion in that although we have that pledge made in Geneva to repeal and replace the draconian PTA, there is now the Aragalaya. We know how this government has reacted to the Aragalaya and is reacting to demonstrations and dissent. And therefore, it's an inescapable conclusion that dealing with this dissent is very much one of the factors that have led to this type of bill, if not the main factor. I mean, just one point as well. I mean, the detention orders, you know, they can extend them, but it has to be approved by a magistrate. And there are a number of other problems. Shall I continue with?
Please.
Yeah, because...
Tell us all the bad things, and then if you can find any good, to balance the books, you might want to tell us.
Well, as I said, I mean, they've taken confessions out.
Right.
But the president is also given the power to make prescription orders against organizations. Prescription orders, yeah? These orders are to be issued against any organization accused of an offense amounting to terrorism, but also when the president has reasonable grounds to believe that an organization is acting prejudicial to national security, or national security of Sri Lanka or of any other country, right? Then also the president has wide powers, similar to the PTA, to make regulations under the bill. Now, we have in the past, in 2021, filed a fundamental rights application to the Supreme Court challenging a set of regulations of this nature, and the Supreme Court stayed the operation of these regulations. You know, he can send someone to a rehabilitation program, for example, when there's the punishment or whatever has been deferred in terms of a criminal act. Yeah. Also, again, I mean, the definition of terrorism is rather broad. It talks about if someone is accused acts of violating the territorial integrity of Sri Lanka, or infringement of the sovereignty of Sri Lanka or any other sovereign country. So, I mean, all of this, in terms of making laws of this nature, or indeed of any nature, you have to have the standards of necessity, of proportionality, and legality, all of which seem to have been put aside with regard to the making of this law.
But either the ordinary people of the country, normally they would be buoyed and feel safer when you have such legislation. And the only people who ought to fear it should be bona fide terrorists, if you can actually have such a thing.
Yeah.
So, should the people? Why are the people? Why do you say that the people are so at risk?
Because the laws are so severe, the punishments, as it were, are so severe, and in this country we have a history of executive abuse of the democratic rights of our citizens. We know what the PTA did to the lives of countless Tamil youth who languished in jail for 10 years, sometimes 20 years, etc. You know, so the problem here is in terms of definition. The problem here is in terms of intent of the government, and it's also a problem with regard to the judicial oversight with regard to this. And the judicial oversight is either weak or absent. You know, so the ordinary person, you're quite right. I mean, if you're not going to commit a terrorist act, you should not be concerned.
Yeah.
But you don't know whether you're going to be committing a terrorist act, given the definitions of terrorism that there are. And particularly if you want to express your opinion with regard to how the government is acting, then you might have to think twice, thrice, or even more, because you could be liable to this, to the provisions of this act.
So it's pretty serious business, really.
It is a pretty serious business, because we've gone from the, you know, from saying we're going to repeal the PTA to bringing in something that is arguably worse. And, you know, overall, this is about terrorism in this country. We would have liked to have seen consultation with civil society. Some of us, as I said before, who have campaigned against this for the last 25, 30 years, you know, there was hardly any or no consultation, not that I'm aware of, in terms of the necessity for the bill, the proportionality, the legality, all of those things were never really discussed with civil society. So, I mean, at the end of the day, what is going to happen in terms of the consequences of this bill? And I can't get away from saying that the consequences of this bill are going to impact the democratic health and future of this country considerably.
Thank you, Dr. Saran. But do we need counter-terror laws in Sri Lanka?
Well, exactly. This is the whole point, and this is where the consultations, the discussions, the debate should have begun. We could amend our criminal procedure code, for example. We have laws which, with a certain amount of amendments, could be brought into line with the whole question of dealing with acts of terrorism. But you know, when you think about acts of terrorism, look what has happened with regard to the Easter Sunday bombing. Has anything really happened in that context? It wasn't prevented. Neither really has it been punished.
Absolutely, it's certainly not been punished. And there was a remarkable breakdown from what we have read about how they handle the information.
No, absolutely, and there are people of high standing who have come out and said, look, that this is probably a political conspiracy of some sort.
But yes, indeed. there are claims of there being a mastermind
Well,
who appears to be still the mastermind, but no,
nothing is happening.
Nothing is happening. It's very typically Sri Lankan thing, apparently, according to a Dutch tourist. He shrugged his shoulders and he said,
Well,
what can you do? What can we do?
But this is exactly what we have to change. And when we're coming to make laws, we have to erase this response of what can we do. So we have to come up with laws that protect and strengthen our civil and political rights, indeed our economic rights as well, and that we don't sort of cave in and capitulate and feel powerless. If we are a democracy, we are supposed to have the power as citizens.
Going back to this business about under this proposed bill, the anti-terrorism bill, the prescription. So technically, if the president felt threatened by a particular political party group, he could have them prescribed.
Well, as indeed presidents have in the past done. Yes, theoretically, technically, that could well happen.
So we're going backwards?
In a lot of ways, yes.
It's amazing.
As far as this bill is concerned. Yeah.
Amazing.
You see, the president has come out and said that he is putting the economy first and foremost right in the forefront of public affairs.
So why is he messing about with these anti-terror laws?
Well, so this is the thing, is I think he has to recognize that, look, economic prosperity cannot be built on a violation or on dwindling civil and political rights. The two have to go together. You can't sort of silo one off against the other. You can't do that. The two have to go together. There is this whole question of legality. There is the overarching question of legitimacy.
And clearly that is
at issue.
But they say that responsibility is sort of built on a foundation of truth. And so when we go back, when the people of Sri Lanka roll back the footage, the archives, which we may not have, but when we go through that, it seems to me that one thing has been very consistent, that our politicians have misled us, have basically, if you want another word, been economical with the truth, or even another word, like lied to us. And it's almost ironic that we're not changing that, but we're going back to some comfort zone from the past.
No, exactly. And, the thing is this, is that, I think, as I said, the president has said that he wants to, start afresh as far as the economy is concerned and change the culture of entitlement and all of that kind of thing. But he has to recognize that you can't really do that without a proper political foundation. Civil rights, political rights, economic rights cannot be divided up and separated. They have to go together, And the sooner we realize this, the better, because we've just entered into an IMF agreement. As we've been told many times, the path ahead is strewn with challenges. And in order for us to meet those challenges and suffer whatever sacrifices that have to be made, we have to be able to believe that the government that we have, we can trust, and that we have confidence in it.
So actually, we're not more than in search of democracy. We're in search of integrity.
Absolutely, and I think in this respect, integrity and democracy go together. Integrity is about taking responsibility, holding yourself accountable. It's not about impunity, which is a cancer on our body politic that has been ruining us for the last so many years.
And on that note, let's go for a quick break and take a peek at this evening's headline news. And we'll be right back with Dr. Pakisoty Saravanamuthu from the CPA, the Center for Policy Alternatives. See you on the other side.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly. TV1, TV for life.
Fuel quota for vehicles increased with effect from midnight. Litro and Laughs reduce prices of LP gas. Central Bank maintains policy interest rates at current levels. Organised program was afoot to destabilise the country during the Gotabaya administration, reveals Namal Rajapaksa. Is Ranil Wickremesinghe the next SLPP presidential candidate? What happened to the anticipated crossovers?
TV1. TV for life.
දහසකට අධික ජනතාවගේ පිරිසිදු පානීය ජල අවශ්‍යතාව සපුරාලමින් මහකර බෑව ගම්මානයට ජල පෙරණ පද්ධතියක් ලබාදීම පසුගියදා ගම්මැද්ද විසින් සිදු කරන ලදී. ගම්මැද්ද රට නගන ජන පෞර.
උගත මනා ශිල්පයමයි මතු රැකෙන ගම්මැද්දෙන් දිවයින පුරා පාසල් හා පෙර පාසල් ව්‍යාපෘති රැසක් සිසු අයිතියට පත් කළ වගයි. රඹෑව පරගස්වැව ශ්‍රී ප්‍රදීපාලෝක පෙර පාසල, අනුරාධපුර ඉසින් බැස්සගම පෙර පාසල, අත්තන් කඩවල යාය 26, මහසෙන් ප්‍රාථමික පාසල, වැලිමඩ මාලිගාතැන්න විද්‍යාලය, මාතලේ කුමුක්කන්දර විල්ගමුව පාසල් පුස්තකාලය, මොන රාගල හම්බෙගමුව විද්‍යාලයේ ජල ව්‍යාපෘතිය, අනුරාධපුර රලපනාව ප්‍රාථමික විද්‍යාලයේ පන්තිකාමර සංවර්ධනය, පුත්තලම කල්පිටිය සින්දාත්‍රි මාත්‍රා විද්‍යාලය සංවර්ධනය. ගම්මැද්ද රට නගන ජන පෞර.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
And welcome back to Newsline Recording. And our guest this evening is Dr. Pakisoti Saravanamuttu, the Executive Director of the Centre for Policy Alternatives. Before I carry on, I'd just like to acknowledge the several viewers that the program has, especially from overseas, from Dubai, from France, Penang, and Singapore today. And I know it's watched in other places too, but I'd just like to, we had messages yesterday from them. So hello there, thank you, and please continue with your viewership. Dr. Saravanamuttu, you've gone to court basically complaining that the elections are not being held. Is this just a ploy, or do you really believe that that you must go to court because...
Oh, yes. Look, citizens of this country have every right to go to court. It's provided, therefore, in the Constitution when there are questions of violations of fundamental rights and over questions of constitutionality of impending legislation. Now, we have gone to court here over an election issue. Look at Sri Lanka today. The president has just one member of parliament supporting him from his own party in parliament, right? He was elected by parliament, so he governs with the support of the opposition in effect. We don't have provincial council elections, and we haven't had them for years. We are now talking about trying to have a local government election, which was postponed for a year, and that was legal to do that. And now we're talking about postponing it in terms of the government, postponing it, well, effectively indefinitely. So as a consequence, what you have in terms of the apex of power, you have a president who is there till 2023, August or September or whatever that month is. Everything, therefore, is being controlled by the presidency. This is an appalling situation in terms of the democratic health of this country. Now, this is not to say that the president hasn't done things which should be applauded with regard to the economy and all of that kind of thing. The manner in which he has done it and all of that, we can have various opinions about. However, the point about democracy is not about consolidating power. That is authoritarian. And then bringing in laws like this Anti-Terrorism Act will only make things worse, you know.
So obviously this is like a quirk in the system, that we can have a person who failed to be elected by his constituency, then gets to sit in parliament because his party gets a bonus seat, and then makes it to becoming an MP, even though he's a defeated candidate. And remember, there was all this thing in the past about, oh, defeated candidates cannot be given jobs to stand the other. But hey, guess what? The defeated candidate is today the president of Sri Lanka. Isn't there some sort of quirk? Who drew these laws up?
Well, those who drew these laws up were people who were interested in capturing power and perpetuating themselves in power. Now, as it stands, the president can dissolve parliament and go for a general election. But obviously he does not want to do it because he will say that it might create political turmoil and we don't have money to do this, all of that, and that we've just got the IMF deal and that we need to sort of, you know, buckle down and ensure that we meet those conditionalities and all of that. But the question that has to be answered is, look, if there is dissent, if there is opposition to it, every time it is being expressed in a demonstration, is the response going to be water cannon and tear gas? Is it going to go beyond that? And isn't that exactly what we should avoid above all else? Where a state uses force against its citizens, when they demonstrate against their rights being violated.
So it's obviously a serious matter, but pray, why is the hearing being held so far away down the calendar?
Well, I mean, I think you have to ask the Supreme Court that question, but that we have gone to court and that we have got leave to proceed and that case will be heard, I think in itself is a small, but not insubstantial at the same time, I must admit, not an insubstantial reminder that democracy is still well and alive in this country.
Indeed, the Supreme Court, especially in recent months, has gone into sort of uncharted areas and so on.
Well, but also we have to avoid the situation of saying, look, the court is our first resort, and trying to get the court to pass judgment on any number of issues. I mean, after all, the question of holding elections should not necessarily be an issue that the court has to intervene in.
Because it's part of our constitution.
No, exactly.
But don't you find it strange, ironic, and everything all rolled into one, that these people who've received the mandate of the people, once safely seated in Parliament, forget all about?
No, absolutely, and that is why I think, you know, from campaign finance laws, but we have to go also to intra-party democracy, how we choose candidates for political parties, how political parties are administered and operate and are organized. I think those are also very key questions which are fundamental to the thriving health of a democracy.
And Dr. Saramuthu, what about all these people who have already been charged under the PTA and so on, who are just languishing? There are all sorts of people.
No, exactly. I mean, they should be set free. I mean, are we really saying that people who were taken in as part of the demonstrations that happened in the last couple of months are terrorists?
But
I mean, that defies logic, explanation.
But do you see how easily the government types, how their talk flows so easily when they say, but these people who the police have arrested have been accused of doing crimes. They're not as innocent as you say.
Well,
but don't you find that a little bit odd?
No, true. I mean, if they are accused of crimes, the evidence should be brought to court, and yes, if they are crimes, they should be prosecuted. But to use draconian laws against them, and to then repeal a draconian law and bring one that's arguably even more draconian in some respects, is, I think, farcical at one level, but it's so farcical that it's so dangerous and so harming to democracy in the country.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your questions, which obviously we can't take tonight because it's a recording, 0772 300 305, but we will take it on the next time round. So what you're saying, really, Dr. Saravamutu, is that this presidency, and I suppose, I don't know, and what about the parliament then, is actually a temporary one. But unfortunately, due to some quirk in our laws, that word hasn't been used and say, well, you're only coming in temporarily.
Well, yes, Ranil Wickremesinghe is president to serve out the term of Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
Yeah.
And when there is another election, we will then find out who our next president is going to be, and that election is due, as I said. I mean, I think it's August, September.
So he doesn't really have to listen to the people when they say we won elections and you must have them.
Well, he doesn't have to listen to the people, but at the same time, then he must face the consequences of not doing so.
But he's been facing his consequences for the last 40 plus years.
Well, true, and he might get away with it, but what the citizens of this country must understand and must realize is that at the end of the day, it's not governments and not political parties who are the real defenders of their freedoms and their fundamental rights. It is them. They cannot be apathetic. They can't pass the buck. We have to take responsibility.
We have to take the responsibility indeed. Dr. Pakisoti Saravamutu, thank you very much for being on Newsline Recording.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that's the way it was. So it's now time for the primetime news, of course. Take care, have a great evening as much as you can, and as always, God bless you.